Sarah's eyes snapped open, her pupils dilating as they struggled to adjust to the oppressive darkness surrounding her. The acrid smell of mold and decay assaulted her nostrils, causing her to gag involuntarily. As she pushed herself up from the cold, damp floor, her hands brushed against something soft and yielding. With a startled gasp, she recoiled, her heart pounding in her chest. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice hoarse and unfamiliar to her own ears. Sarah tried to recall how she had arrived in this place, but her mind was a blank slate. Panic began to set in as she realized she couldn't even remember her own last name. As her eyes slowly adapted to the gloom, Sarah found herself in what appeared to be a decaying hospital room. Rusted bed frames lined the walls, their mattresses long since rotted away. Shattered glass crunched beneath her feet as she cautiously made her way to the door, guided by an inexplicable familiarity with the layout. In the corridor outside, flickering emergency lights cast eerie shadows that seemed to dance and writhe along the peeling walls. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she noticed a figure slumped against the far wall. "Hello?" she called out hesitantly, approaching the motionless form. "Are you okay?" The figure stirred, revealing a man in his mid-30s with disheveled dark hair and a look of confusion etched across his face. I don't know," he stammered, his eyes darting wildly around the hallway. "Who are you? Where are we?" "I'm Sarah," she replied, surprised at how naturally the name came to her lips, despite her inability to remember anything else about herself. "As for where we are, your guess is as good as mine. What's your name?" The man's brow furrowed in concentration. "Michael, I think, but I can't remember anything else. It's like my mind is empty." Before Sarah could respond, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the building, causing them both to freeze in terror. The sound seemed to come from somewhere above them, reverberating off the walls and sending chills down their spines. "We need to find out what's going on," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Can you walk?" Michael nodded, pushing himself to his feet with visible effort. Together they made their way down the corridor, the emergency lights flickering ominously as they passed. As they rounded a corner, they nearly collided with a young woman who came sprinting towards them, her eyes wide with fear. "Run!" she gasped, grabbing Sarah's arm. "There's something in there, something horrible." "Slow down," Sarah said, trying to calm the panicked woman. "What's your name?" "What did you see?" The woman's breathing was ragged as she replied, "I'm Emily. I woke up in a room upstairs, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw faces, dozens of them, screaming silently behind my reflection. And then the mirror shattered, and I ran." Michael and Sarah exchanged worried glances. "We don't remember how we got here either," Michael explained. "Do you know anything about this place?" Emily shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. "No, I can't remember anything before waking up here. What's happening to us?" Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. A tall, muscular man with close-cropped hair and a stern expression rounded the corner, his stance alert and ready for action. "Who are you people?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "What is this place?" "We're just as lost as you are," Sarah replied, holding up her hands in a placating gesture. "I'm Sarah, and this is Michael and Emily. We all woke up here with no memory of how we arrived. What's your name?" The man's posture relaxed slightly, but wariness remained in his eyes. "David, ex-military. Last thing I remember is nothing. It's all a blank." As the group stood in uneasy silence trying to process their situation, a fifth figure emerged from the shadows. A bespectacled man in his late 20s approached cautiously, his eyes darting between the other four. "Hello," he said hesitantly. "I'm Ethan. I heard voices and thought I should investigate. I assume you're all in the same boat as me. No memories, no idea how we got here." The others nodded in unison, a shared look of confusion and fear passing between them. Suddenly, a whisper seemed to emanate from the very walls around them, causing everyone to tense. The sound was barely audible, but unmistakably there, a chorus of muffled voices speaking words just beyond comprehension. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, the emergency lights flickered violently, plunging the corridor into total darkness for a heart-stopping moment. When they sputtered back to life, the group found themselves huddled together, their backs to one another as they stared wide-eyed into the oppressive gloom of the asylum. "We need to find a way out of here," David said, his military training evident in his tone. "This place isn't safe." Sarah nodded in agreement, but something tugged at the edges of her mind, a nagging feeling that she knew more about this place than she was able to remember. "I think I might know a safe place we can regroup," she said, surprising herself. "Follow me." As Sarah led the group through the maze-like corridors of the asylum, each step echoing ominously in the decaying halls, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Unseen eyes seemed to follow their every move, and the whispers in the walls grew more insistent, as if trying to communicate some terrible truth just beyond their grasp. Little did they know their journey into the heart of the asylum had only just begun, and the horrors that awaited them would test not only their will to survive but the very nature of their own identities. The group huddled together in the dim corridor, their breath visible in the chilly air. Sarah, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow, led them through the maze-like hallways of the asylum. The peeling wallpaper and cracked tiles beneath their feet told a story of decades of neglect. "We need to find some answers," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There has to be something here that can tell us why we're in this place." As they rounded a corner, Ethan's foot caught on something, sending him stumbling forward. David's quick reflexes saved him from falling face first onto the grimy floor. "Thanks," Ethan muttered, adjusting his glasses. He bent down to examine what he had tripped over. "Wait, look at this." The others gathered around as Ethan pulled a dusty tape recorder from beneath a fallen ceiling tile. Its aged plastic was yellowed, but it seemed intact. "Do you think it still works?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan fiddled with the device, and to everyone's surprise, a scratchy voice filled the air. "Subject 23 has shown remarkable progress. The integration of multiple personalities seems to be taking hold. However, the side effects are concerning. We may need to terminate the experiment if—" The recording cut off abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. "What the hell was that about?" David asked, his military training evident in his tense posture. Before anyone could respond, a piercing scream echoed through the corridors. Emily's eyes widened in terror as she clutched her head, falling to her knees. "Emily!" Sarah cried, rushing to her side. "What's wrong?" Emily's eyes were unfocused, staring at something only she could see. "No, please, don't strap me down. I'll be good, I promise." The others watched in horror as Emily thrashed on the floor, caught in the grip of a vivid hallucination. Sarah held her, trying to soothe her, while the men looked on helplessly. After what seemed like an eternity, Emily's movements slowed and her eyes cleared. She looked up at the concerned faces surrounding her, confusion and fear etched on her features. "What? What happened?" she asked weakly. "You had some kind of episode," Ethan explained gently. "A hallucination, I think. You were talking about being strapped down." Emily shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself. "It felt so real. I was on a hospital bed, and there were doctors. They were going to do something to me." David's jaw clenched. "We need to get out of here. This place is messing with our heads." As if in response to his words, a distant, inhuman scream echoed through the corridors, causing them all to freeze. "What was that?" Michael whispered, his face pale. Sarah helped Emily to her feet, her expression determined. I don't know, but we can't stay here. We need to keep moving and find more clues about what's going on. They continued their exploration, the atmosphere growing more oppressive with each step. The walls seemed to close in around them, and shadows danced at the edge of their vision. As they entered what appeared to be an old administrative office, David's military instincts kicked in. "We need to secure this area," he said, his voice taking on a commanding tone. "Barricade the doors, check for any weapons or tools we can use." The others nodded, grateful for his leadership. As they worked to fortify their position, Ethan continued to examine the tape recorder. "There might be more of these around," he mused. "If we can find them, they could give us some insight into what kind of experiments were conducted here." Sarah nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Good idea, but we need to be careful. Whatever happened here, I have a feeling it's not over." As if to punctuate her words, another inhuman scream rang out, closer this time. The group huddled together, their eyes wide with fear. "Did anyone else notice?" Michael asked, his voice shaking. "That scream. It sounded like it was made up of multiple voices." A chill ran down their spines as they realized he was right. The scream hadn't been a single voice, but a cacophony of agonized cries blended into one terrifying sound. As they stood in silence processing this new horror, Emily suddenly gasped. "The symbol on the recorder," she said, pointing to a faded mark on the device. "I've seen it before in my vision." The others leaned in to examine the symbol, a complex geometric pattern that seemed to shift and move if you stared at it too long. "This can't be a coincidence," Ethan muttered. "Whatever experiments they were conducting here, they're connected to what's happening to us now." Sarah nodded grimly. "We need to find more recordings, more clues. It's the only way we're going to figure out how to get out of here." As they prepared to continue their exploration, each of them couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The asylum seemed to be coming alive around them, its dark history seeping into the present. The echoes of the past were growing louder, and with each revelation, the danger they faced became more apparent. What other horrors awaited them in the depths of this forsaken place? And more importantly, would they be able to escape before it was too late? With determination and fear in equal measure, they stepped back into the corridor, ready to face whatever nightmares the asylum had in store for them. The flickering fluorescent lights cast an eerie glow across the asylum's decaying walls as Ethan pored over a stack of yellowed documents he had discovered in an abandoned office. His brow furrowed in concentration, the academic's mind racing to piece together the fragments of information scattered before him. "I think I'm starting to understand the nature of the experiments that were conducted here," Ethan announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. The others gathered around him, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Sarah leaned in, her eyes scanning the documents. "What have you found?" Ethan's fingers trembled slightly as he held up a faded photograph of a patient strapped to a chair, electrodes attached to their head. "It seems they were attempting to merge multiple personalities into a single, unified consciousness. But the methods they used—" He trailed off, swallowing hard. David, his military instincts on high alert, paced the room. "That's insane. How could they even attempt something like that?" As if in response to David's question, a bone-chilling scream reverberated through the corridors, causing everyone to freeze. The sound was unlike anything they had ever heard before. A cacophony of voices merged into one inhuman wail. Emily clutched her head, whimpering. "What was that?" Before anyone could answer, the temperature in the room plummeted. Their breath materialized in front of them in wispy clouds. The lights flickered more intensely, and then, in a moment of complete darkness, they saw it. A grotesque figure materialized in the doorway, its form constantly shifting and writhing. It was as if multiple bodies were trying to occupy the same space, limbs and faces merging and separating in a nauseating display. The entity's eyes, dozens of them, focused on the group, filled with a mixture of agony and rage. Sarah instinctively stepped in front of the others, her body tense. "Don't move," she whispered. The entity let out another bone-chilling scream, causing the windows to rattle in their frames. As it began to move towards them, Michael's eyes widened in recognition. On the entity's constantly shifting chest, a symbol pulsed with an otherworldly light. "That symbol," Michael gasped, his face pale. I know it." As the words left his mouth, fragmented memories flashed through Michael's mind. He saw himself strapped to a chair, similar to the one in the photograph. The symbol burned brightly in front of him as agonizing pain coursed through his body. The memory vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Michael shaken. The entity lunged forward, its form seeming to stretch and distort as it moved. David reacted instantly, grabbing a nearby chair and swinging it at the creature. The chair passed through the entity as if it were made of smoke, shattering against the wall behind it. "This way," Sarah shouted, gesturing towards a hidden passage behind a bookcase. The others didn't hesitate, racing towards the escape route as the entity's inhuman screams filled the air. As they ran through the narrow corridor, the walls seemed to pulse and breathe around them. Emily stumbled, her hand brushing against the wall. She recoiled in horror as she felt something warm and wet beneath her fingers. They emerged into a small, circular room with no other visible exits. Sarah quickly closed the hidden door behind them, her hands moving with practiced ease over the locking mechanism. "How did you know about this place?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Sarah's eyes darted around the room, avoiding their gazes. I'm not sure. It's like I've been here before, but I can't remember when or why." The group took in their surroundings. The room was sparsely furnished with a few cots, a small table, and what appeared to be a ham radio set. "This must be some kind of safe room," David observed, his military training kicking in as he assessed their shelter. Michael sat heavily on one of the cots, his face ashen. "That symbol on the entity. I've seen it before. In my memories. I think I was a patient here." The others stared at him in shock. Emily moved to sit beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "What do you remember?" Michael shook his head, frustration evident in his voice. "It's all fragments, pain, that symbol, feeling like my mind was being torn apart, but I can't piece it all together." Ethan began to pace, his academic mind racing. If Michael was a patient and Sarah seems to know the layout of this place, then maybe we're all connected to this asylum somehow. But how? And why can't we remember? A heavy silence fell over the group as they contemplated the implications of Ethan's words. The safety of the hidden room was a stark contrast to the horrors they had just witnessed, but it did little to calm their frayed nerves. Sarah moved to the ham radio, her fingers hovering over the dials. "Maybe we can use this to call for help." As she reached to turn it on, a static-filled voice crackled through the speakers, causing everyone to jump. Through the interference, they could make out fragments of a message. "Experiment. Success. Merge. Beware the echo." The voice faded, leaving them in stunned silence. The entity's screams, muffled but still audible, served as a chilling reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond their sanctuary. David's voice was grim as he voiced the thought they were all having. "I think we're trapped in something much bigger and more dangerous than we realized. And whatever that thing out there is, it's the key to understanding what happened here and what happened to us." As they huddled in the safe room, the asylum's dark secrets continued to echo around them, promising more horrors to come.